Organisms and Environments, Summative Review. Today we can investigate how organisms and populations in an ecosystem depend on and may compete for biotic factors such as food and abiotic factors such as quantity of light, water, range of temperatures, or soil competition. For your starter, wild hogs introduced to Texas from Europe became feral after the hogs escaped from the ranches where they lived. Feral hogs are omnivores that feed on native plants, crops, and small animals. Feral hogs can damage an ecosystem by rooting through the soil to look for food and trampling small plants. Which type of native organisms do feral hogs most likely compete with for food resources? So, going back up here, we understand that hogs are omnivores. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. So, they would compete with other organisms that eat plants, those are called herbivores, and they would also compete with organisms that eat other organisms, those are carnivores. So this feral hog would have no competition with producers. Remember, producers make their own food using the sun's energy. So there's no competition with producers. There are also no competition with decomposers. Decomposers break down dead, decaying matter. So we're going to read each question and then we're going to drag and drop to identify whether the factors in an ecosystem are either biotic or abiotic. Remember, abiotic means that those are non-living factors, and bio means life, so biotic would be your living factors. So looking here at the sun, we can say the sun is abiotic, it's non-living. Bacteria is living, so we're going to call that biotic. And remember, bacteria are decomposers, they break down dead, decaying material. A decaying tree, so that is biotic, it's once living. So we also identify biotic as living or once living. So soil is going to be abiotic because it's non-living. Water is abiotic because that is non-living, it's not alive. A frog, he for sure, or it is biotic. Air is going to be abiotic. Remember, that's also referred to as the atmosphere. Paramecium, that's living, so it's going to be biotic. It's microscopic, but we also have cells that are living that are microscopic. And minerals are going to be non-living. And a fallen leaf is also going to be biotic because it was once living. Let's read the questions on the left side of the table under the graph and then choose the correct answer next to the question and drag and drop the word card next to the table. So, fish in a lake compete for space. At what temperature range will there be the most competition for space among the fish species? So here's your temperature range on the x-axis and your type of fish on the y. So here you can see that all three fish are located in the temperature range of 25 to 30. So that's where you're going to have the most competition. So if I minimize, I can drag and drop. So between 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, you're going to have the most competition. And you're looking at that bar vertically up and down. If the lake temperature cooled, how would this impact the number of fish competing for space? So if we got cooler temperatures, then the lake trout would have no other fish to compete with as they prefer cooler water. Lake trout would have to compete with all other fish species. So it depends really how you're looking at this. I would say if temperatures got cooler, then the largemouth bass, sunfish, and bullhead would go into the cooler temperatures and they'd have to compete for space. Or you could say that these fish could not survive in cooler temperatures, so they would die out, and the lake trout would have no competition with other fish in the cooler water. So it goes both ways as long as you can explain your point of view. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And here, our teak, we can explore how short and long-term environmental changes affect organisms and traits in subsequent populations. Lions and cheetahs prey on wildebeests that graze in the grassland of the African savanna. What likely effect would increased rainfall over several rainy seasons have on the population of wildebeests, lions, and cheetahs? Well, if there is more grass being produced because there's more rain, you're going to have more wildebeests because there's more food. If there's more wildebeests, then there'll be more lions because the lions prey on the wildebeests. And there'll be more lions because of more wildebeest, so the cheetah population would also increase. So overall, we can say all three populations would increase because there's an increase in resources. Food. Read each type of change below, and then we're going to drag and drop the response cards above the table to identify each change as short or long-term environmental changes. So remember, short term, it happens very quickly. So that's a flood. And in a short term environmental change, either the organism migrates or it dies. In a fire, that's short term, it happens very quickly. And again, either the organisms migrate, die, or have adaptations that allow them to survive. Desertification is going to be long term. And what that is it's a change in the desert ecosystem due to completely no rain, and it dries everything completely out, and there's no life there in the desert ecosystem. Extinction is going to be long term because that's permanent. You can't get those organisms back. An early frost would be short term, that just happens quickly and does not last long. Climate change is a long-term environmental change. A hurricane happens quickly for a short period of time. And then deforestation is long-term. Remember, deforestation is the cutting of trees. So either succession needs to take place and those grasses, shrubs, small trees come over a long period of time. The graph illustrates the effect of pesticides on mosquitoes. Then choose the correct answer next to the question and drag and drop the word card onto the table. So here we have the number of years, 10, and the number of mosquitoes in thousands. So what we can see here is a decrease in the mosquito population, and then still a decrease here, it's flattening off, and then our mosquito population is increasing. So our question, was the pesticides applied short-term or a long-term change to the environment? So let's reread. The graph illustrates the effect of pesticides on mosquitoes. I would say that that is short-term. It only happens 1 to 2 years. And you see the change in the population with the use of pesticides. What happened in the first 2 years of the mosquito population once the pesticides were introduced? I can see a decline, so the population decreased. What can you infer what will happen after 10 years to the mosquito population? So here you see the mosquito population on an increase, on a rebound, but if the use of pesticides is continuously used, maybe these mosquitoes are growing an adaptation now to that pesticide and their population is increasing. So the population will decrease because they are not resistant to the pesticide. The population will increase because they are resistant now. So you can see they are not resistant, but one or two mosquitoes might be. And what happens? They reproduce, get the resources, and no longer is that pesticide having an effect on them. The population begins to increase again. All right, for our exit question, it says which of the following is most likely to cause a change in the genetic traits in an isolated population of ground dwelling lizard species? So, if the lizard is ground dwelling, that means it is on the ground. So, what could change the genetic traits in future populations of this lizard? Well, the introduction of an invasive predator that preys on the brightest colored individuals in the population would have an effect on the genetic traits because those lizards that are colorful would be eaten by the invasive species, so their genetic traits of being colorful could not be passed on to future populations. Where the lizards who are not so bright could reproduce, get the resources, and then pass their traits to future populations. So the answer to the question is number 3. Okay, it would not be this last one, a fast-moving wildfire that burns the canopy of trees. Canopies are the top of trees, and in our question, it's telling us that this lizard is ground dwelling. So he's on the ground. So 4 is out of the question. A dry summer is not going to change the genetic trait of the lizard population. They will pass their genetic traits regardless, as well as number 1, the exposure of an individual lizard in the population to radiation. That's just one lizard, so that is not going to change the genetic traits over time. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed today's review. Good luck on your summative test.